Well, that was fast. We did a show last night, and I said I'd probably do a BRAP rant some point next week. But we're doing a BRAP rant tonight, right before, I might add. In about 3 hours or so, the good folks over at DPS Podcast will be going live. That is Gaming Forte and Slow-Mo Backslap. They are going live tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So you definitely want to give them a just check them out. Check them out. They should have a great show. They always do. The show will be on Slow-Mo's channel, Slow-Mo Backslap on YouTube. Tonight, again, at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, so definitely check them out. So we'll keep you entertained. We'll warm up, those that are going to listen, I guess we're the opening act, if you will. But anyhow, I have with me, and this man probably needs no introduction at this point, but we got Hamp back with us. What's up, Hamp?
Not much, man. I think we'll change that from especially Lee Hampton to the infamous. Maybe that's what we'll move that to.
Yes, you are the infamous now. Look, I did say I was going to do a BRAP rant next week, but turned out that actually happened 24 hours after I said that. So, but real quick, want to give a big shout out to everyone in the live chat that joined us for this impromptu BRAP rant. I just dropped a link in the live chat, and please do me a favor, retweet the link, post it on your favorite social media platform, let everyone know that we're live. Because this is. We joke around about being the Truth Network. The one thing that we try to do here on BRAP, and I've talked about this last night and on previous shows, like we're not here for the bullshit. We try to offer a well thought out, I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. We try to offer a well thought out conversation. We try to offer well thought out conversation pieces about all things video gaming. We're not here to gaslight, which a lot of podcasts do, and I'm going to pick on the Xbox podcast tonight. Not that the Sony diehards aren't not guilty of this, but the focus and the title of the show is Xbox fans. We need consistency here, so we're going to talk about that. But in particular, there are many popular Xbox-centric podcasts that like to gaslight, don't really have well thought out conversations, don't do any research, and sound like InfoWars. If you follow Alex Jones at InfoWars, that's probably the best way to describe. And we don't do that here. Like, we're not trying to do that here. We are offering something else. We are offering conversation that's based on some knowledge, and this is why we have Hamp here, who's a software developer, engineer, and has just great acumen, business acumen, and just has a certain level of expertise that I don't have. But again, we made him or had him come on as a permanent host because of the expertise he has. So that's what we offer here, and each one of us has a particular expertise, if you will, and we're just here to offer something different, and we do that. I think Hamp, you would agree that we do a pretty good job at offering an alternative as compared to some of the Xbox centric podcasts that are out there gaslighting and just, let's be frank, just talking out of their rear ends, and that's putting it nicely.
I actually think you labeling them as similar to Alex Jones is actually more than they deserve.
Oh wow! Okay.
Listening to some of the sound bites that I heard today, it sounded like like when you were back like in college and you had like the college radio station.
Yeah.
That was like the radio club or whatever. You said that's what it sounded like. In fact, I've actually heard some college radio stations that actually have more mature DJs than some of the stuff that I heard, today. I appreciate
real quick, I'm sorry, but there's also something there's a level of intellectual maturity that we offer this show on this show that not many podcasts offer. And some of the stuff that I've heard today, some of the stuff I've heard the last week or so, and this is adults, and this is the part that kills me. Adult men, the emotional immaturity over a hobby, over a luxury item, Like let's get upset. Let's show emotion over things that actually have impact in our lives. You know, like you talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. let's have some emotion over things that have impact in our life, that actually matter, but not a luxury, not a hobby like this. And I'm telling, look, if you are looking for a different conversation, if you're looking for an informed conversation, if you're looking for well thought out conversations that are a bit more nuanced than what's out there, you've come to the right place. Sorry, Hep, go ahead, man.
No, that's a good point. And like some of the things you bring up, even like, you know, are troubling, you know, on a daily basis in the dialogue, right? Like, you know, you bring up the analogy of like the products to compare it to, and like no matter what analogy we try and draw, right? Which is not to draw an analogy to that particular product or class of products or group of, but to point to like it should be acceptable to use as an analogy any product that is not a necessity, right? Any product that is not bread, cheese. Like for certain people, gas is a necessity, right? But like no matter what analogy you use, the camp who doubles down on refusing to use logic says that it's not applicable, right? You compare it to fast food, which again is a luxury. Nobody's pointing a gun at your head and telling you have to go buy fast food. It is not a staple. It is not a thing that you're required to have to survive. You can go to the grocery store and buy food. Fast food is actually a luxury, right? Granted, low-cost luxury, usually, relatively, for, you know, many people, not for a lot of people. A lot of people can't afford to go buy fast food, right? But the point is that it is a product of convenience where people make food for you so that you can go by and get it relatively quickly, right? It is not an absolute necessity. Comparing how people react to video games in contrast to how they react to fast food should be an acceptable analogy. When we draw the analogy to higher price products like cars or motorcycles, people go, oh, you brought expensive luxury items into the conversation. Again, the scale of the expense shouldn't matter. It should simply be the fact that it's a luxury item. But then even when I point them to electronics that are in the same price band as video games, right? Things that are in the $50, $60, $70, $80, $90, $100 price range, people for some reason say that analogy's not applicable. And they do that because it doesn't serve their narrative. So it's incredibly frustrating to try and do the show in the way that we do it, and then to carry that conversation anywhere beyond the show itself, when we constantly just encounter people who for some reason choose not to use logic or rationality.
Yeah, and a lot of it is, you know, I don't know, like I guess you want to call them hot takes. People are really quick to make these hot takes, to make, again, like it's logic is thrown out the window on social media. Like I'm seeing this. It leads me to believe that we're heading down the road towards idiocracy. If you haven't watched that movie, I suggest you watch that movie. We may be drinking Brando in 5 to 10 years. But a lot of people just throw that out the window. Like and I've said this, and I first I said this jokingly, but our education system here in the United States has failed us. We have lost as a society the ability to critically think. You see it on social media all the time. You see these knee-jerk reactions. We saw it with the PlayStation, what I call battery gate. You saw, 75 million people voted for Trump. That should not surprise you. Borbor, I don't, I don't disagree with that. Unfortunately, like I have jokingly said, and I'm not sure if I consider I'm at the point now where maybe it's not a joke anymore, but perhaps people should have a litmus test should be required for you to vote in this country. I know that's probably a controversial thing to say, but the fact that people fall for misinformation, disinformation, and then go vote based on that is actually terrifying. And we actually saw the impact of that on January 6th of 2021. So, but there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation that goes around in social media as it relates to video games, which I don't understand why that happens. It's a hobby, it's a luxury item. But again, we have podcasts and we have Xbox Centric podcasts that spit hyperbole out in the wind, that gaslight, that rile up, get everyone kind of riled up, and angry and it's almost like they're playing on, and I don't know if Xbox gamers feel disenfranchised in the Xbox community, but it's almost like Hamp that they're playing on the emotions of those who maybe feel disenfranchised. And you should, if you feel disenfranchised with a product, maybe it's time to look inward and say, you know what, I'm not happy with this product. I'm going to go elsewhere, because that's what most consumers do. Logically speaking, they go and they take their business elsewhere. And if your product is third place, that doesn't mean that it's not a good product. As long as you enjoy it, that's all that matters. But I gotta be honest with you, when people are out there on these shows saying that Jim Ryan, hey, I might not know about, I might not have a background in business, but I can tell you about truth and honesty. Well, perhaps you shouldn't comment on anything business related, because you've already admitted that you don't have business acumen. So why would you even go down that path? Because all you're doing is misleading your listeners and fueling false narratives and putting out misinformation and disinformation. It's counterproductive. Go ahead, Amp. I think you wanted to chime in.
No, you got to get this super chat because it's hilarious.
Big shout out to Sir X-Men with the 2000 super chat. Brondo has electrolytes, helps plants grow. This is true.
So Speak Up 84 in the chat says, I'm happy with the console, just need the games. And Speak Up 84, that's the exact type of ethos that I'm personally talking about when I talk about our disappointment, right, in the behavior of the so-called gaming community, right? People should be able to go out and buy an Xbox and be happy with an Xbox and play games on Xbox and be fine with it. There's absolutely no need for those people to throw shade at other gamers, to try and tear other gamers down because they feel a need to have their purchase justified, because they have a need to have their brand alignment justified, because they have a need to, it's kind of like sports teams, right? It's like when a team is out there and they're 0-9, right? And they're throwing shade at other teams, maybe that's the time to shut up, right? And it's like I said, one of the things I said today was, I play Halo Infinite, I play Microsoft Flight Simulator, I play, what's the third one? Forza Horizon 5. I post game clips of those games when I play them. I talk about how much I enjoy playing those games. I don't try and draw a comparison between those games and PlayStation games or Nintendo Switch games, or I play a lot of those games on PC, so let me not say PC games, because it's unnecessary. Yeah. It's unnecessary for me to try and, in an effort to elevate my own ego, it's unnecessary for me to clamber on and climb on and elevate right on the shoulders and backs of others to make them feel bad so that I can feel good. That shows a level of insecurity. That shows a lack of self-awareness. That represents the behavior of somebody who, to me, doesn't have enough of significance and importance going on in their real life, that therefore they need to come onto the internet to try and be something more than they actually are, in an effort to make up for disappointment in their own reality. So I don't really understand it. And I don't really understand why, again, you can't play the games, say that you're happy with the system. I talk all the time about how I'm happy with my Xbox controllers, right? One of the things that I love about my Xbox controllers is I bought my Xbox One controllers, 9 years ago, right? I've bought 4 Design Labs controllers, and through the multiple generations and playing those controllers on PC, I can use them anywhere. Now I can use them with my mobile devices. I can use them anywhere. The batteries are always compatible across all the series, right? Even some of the third-party batteries that I've used, are compatible. Although I have, a couple nits with, where they've changed the alignment of some of the secure tabs and things like that. So I just don't really get it, And I can talk about that.
Yeah, by the way, AC says, what's good? Lee speaking facts. Go ahead.
Thanks a lot, AC. And I'm able to speak about that without concurrently saying out of the other side of my mouth, yeah, and I'm glad that they're so much better than the DualSense. Right? But on top of that, right, the other point is that when you're supportive of the console that's in third place, and then you say things like that just makes you not very credible, right? And I don't understand how those people, I don't know, rise to a certain popularity, except that they are, right, trying to incite dissent, right?
Well, but
and try to rile everyone up.
They're preying on those who feel disfranchised. Right. I mean, it's like, look, and not to get political, but it's very much what Trump did. When he ran for office in 2016.
I mean, let's be real. It's how every fascist regime on the face of the planet has come to power.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right? I mean if you look at history,
people flip out when you say that, but that is sociologically accurate, right? And again, sociology is the science, right, that looks at behaviors of cultures and human beings and their interaction with their environment.
I don't know if you know this, but not only was I an Xbox Live beta tester, but I'm also a sociology major with a minor in psychology. So you're not wrong. But and I'm sorry, real quick, Camp. But and I made this comment on Twitter that the Xbox community and some of the what I would call the extremist podcasters are like the extreme right, and somebody got upset that I said that, and it's like no, like. You need to understand something. Like, you need to understand that, and I said extreme right because to me, that group is the one that is really preying on the. I say preying, but really speaking to those who feel disenfranchised for whatever reason. And go ahead, man.
Disenfranchised is complimentary. I would say weak-minded. Right, because that's the other half of that.
In this case,
you can be disenfranchised, but like you're only susceptible to that influence if you're weak-minded.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and so that's the unfortunate part, man. And it's look, I've been on Twitter since 2013. It's gotten worse. It's gotten progressively worse, and it has become a place that. It's hard to have discourse. It's hard to have, look, we don't all necessarily have to agree, and that's fair. But let's try to have some well thought out conversation pieces, as opposed to like what we saw with earlier this week, where somebody was trying to say that, well, this is overpriced because if you compare it to prices of other products.
That are on sale.
That are on sale
2 or 3 years ago.
Yes, that's my proof. It's like, no, it's overpriced to you. And that's the other thing, Hap. Everyone wants to ascribe whatever they see value in to the rest of the market. Well, you know what? $70 games are a ripoff, so that means
everyone should feel that way.
Everyone should feel that way. Exactly. No,
not only should everyone feel that way, but then that's actually the fiscal reality, right? Because I feel they're overpriced. Therefore, they are by definition, right, mathematically overpriced, economically overpriced.
And the other thing that frustrates me about certain podcasts too is that they take their stance and they apply to the mass market as if it's gospel, and it's like, no, like that's fair. If that's your opinion, fine, whatever, Like I've been saying, like you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts.
Right, and then to be. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but you can't. But and I saw that. Oh well, cash grab this and cash grab that and anti-consumer this. No, it's not. It's not for you. You're not the. Everyone thinks, and a lot of these extremist podcasters, they think that they are the addressable market. That it's just them, and it's like no. It's so much more nuanced, and no one thinks about that. Hamp. That shit drives me crazy. By the way, that no one says, wait a minute, like I realize, and they have to see it everywhere else. Like, you have to imagine that they see this stuff with every other consumer product. Not everyone's going to go out and buy a $2,000 LG C1 like I did. Yeah, not everyone's going to go out and buy a BMW M5.
Right. And the problem where some of these podcasts, right, put people on the cliff and why it really bothers us. Like, look, if you have a perspective that's different than mine, I don't really care. What becomes problematic is that the podcast then platform from their perspective and their view to then try and be market analysts, market assessors, and then speak to those things as facts, convey them to listeners, and then listeners run away and believe that that's what's really going on in the industry and in the business. As we have, today with the topic of the PlayStation 5 DualSense Edge, which has no no quantification right around it as far as reports today. But one podcaster has said the battery life is 3 to 4 hours less, and everyone's running with that.
And real quick, Hamp, by the way, just as an example, Apex Predator, you just gave an example of what's happening now. A podcaster said, and this person is, look, Sony has not officially commented on the actual battery life per hours. So what happened was somebody took what their average battery life is for a DualSense and applied some, arbitrary number to the battery life versus the yes, thank you, Slimo. Moderately shorter. Thank you, Slimo. Big shout out to Slimo Backslap, by the way. Slimo's right. All they said, it was moderately shorter. So you have a podcaster that went out there and said, well, my DualSense lasts 5 to 6 hours. Moderately shorter, that's probably 3 to 4 hours. So what's happened now? Now you created this false narrative, and you have Apex Predator right now saying, hey, look, the PS5's last 3 hours. The controller. Like, what? Like, that hasn't even been Sony, no one's confirmed that battery life for the DualSense Edge. But again, this is what happens when people get overly emotional and start rattling shit out of their rear ends, and this is the end result. Misinformation, disinformation. Now people are going out there, and I've seen this. So not just Apex Predator, but a couple other people I've seen on social media say, "Oh, the DualSense Edge is 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours." I'm like, no, we don't know that. So
right. So I mean, the sentiment, Apex, in your first half of your sentence is good, and actually maybe that's why it's a little so upsetting, because then it twists on its head as you finish. It's good to look at things logically, but sometimes you got to look at things the way they are. And this is in, for example, one of the conversations that we have on the show, because we don't always agree on the show, right? But the fact that, right, games are less expensive today due to inflation, right? Which, again, I agree with is an economic fact. But I also understand, right, that at the end user consumer point, right, they don't think about that. All they think about is the immediate impact on their disposable cash, right? So there is an economic fact that doesn't necessarily translate to the way people feel about it. This is another problem that is very prevalent in social media, is that it seems like gamers in social media, it seems like it's impossible for them for two states of being to exist, right? For there to be an economic reality that they can admit to, right? And accept and agree that that's fact, but then say, okay, but I don't feel about it that way. And so our problem with this battery life thing, as I mentioned right last night and before, is, and the reason Sony says moderately less, and that's probably all they're going to say. Here's the problem, as we should know, right, with battery life, and particularly with the DualSense. What the battery life is highly subjective to use case, right? It depends on what game you play. It depends on whether or not you have that goofy microphone just turned on, which most people do for no reason. It depends, right? It depends on other things, that you set up on the controller. Like if you go back to the DualShock, right, you had the ability to configure the brightness level on that light, right? And we know that having that light turned on all the time and having it set to max brightness had a negative impact on battery life. So Sony is not likely to necessarily put a number on it because it depends. And this is why I said, right, in response to all of the concern about the battery life, is I can't pin a tail on the outrage, right, if I don't know that the outrage is actually applicable based on your use case, right? A lot of conversation went around today, like, don't you guys play for 3 or 4 hours at a time? Well, no, actually I don't. I actually play for about 2 hours at a sitting. And by that time, either I have something else in life that has to happen, or I just need to go use the bathroom, or I just go get a cup of coffee. But it is not typical that I sit in a chair and play for 2 hours straight. So that may not impact my particular use case. And then what I called out was, I talked about the statistics that we know for the average gamer. The average gamer, right? So again, translate, right, those words and those statistics to an objective reality. Maybe that will help people understand it. We're talking about the middle point of the bell curve, right? We're talking about the vast majority of people. We're talking about the fact, the mathematic point that most gamers, right, gather around, right, in their usage behavior. Most of those people won't be impacted by a DualSense Edge battery life that's even, let's just even say 4 hours, right? So yes, even though you can still look at that as a negative, some people will look at that and say, that's not great, but it doesn't directly impact me. Some people will look at that and say, that's not great, it doesn't necessarily impact me, but I don't feel like it should be $200 based on the other features, and still won't pay it. And all of that is fine. But the problem is that the lemmings lining up on the cliff edge, looking at the one soundbite, not reading the rest of the hands-on previews, by the way, because I could tell by the dialogue throughout social media, none of those people called out any of the other factors that were addressed in the hands-on previews, right? All they focused on was the battery life. And there are multiple cases that we have in consumer products where that just doesn't really kind of make sense. You know, two of the things that I pointed out today, a gaming laptop has less battery life, right, than a similar laptop in the model series from the exact same vendor, right? If I buy an Asus gaming laptop, I don't get upset that it doesn't have the same battery life as one of their business notebooks. I don't have the expectation that it does. I don't say, I'm paying more for this gaming laptop. I expect it to do all of the exact same things that the other SKU does. We talk about cars and motorcycles, right? There are some expensive cars, there are some cars that you buy that are more expensive than others from the same exact vendor that are slower, maybe have a smaller gas take. I don't necessarily assume that because I'm paying more, all of the specs are the exact same. We've talked about this multiple times on the show with regards to, you know, software, but it's obviously the same as applicable to hardware. There are trade-offs, and people have to take the capabilities of any given piece of hardware, look at their use cases, and ascertain whether or not those things are impactful to them and whether or not they make a difference. Then they have to decide whether or not the price is applicable to them. The $200 price point for the DualSense Edge, I've said the entire time, I don't know that if it had great battery life, that price point really meets with everybody's point of acceptance. But you know, conveying to users that evaluation needs to be made has been entirely obfuscated and overrun by this notion of the battery life, which again may be an impactful deal, may not. The primary reasons that those hands-on previewers couldn't comment about the battery life, because if you notice and look at all the hands-on previews, none of them put a number around that, is because, as I've said before, battery life is impacted by software. The software is not complete. We're 6 weeks, 2 months, right before release. The other thing is battery life.
Can you say that again, Hamp? Because again, this is an issue I have with some of the jumped in conclusions mats that have been pulled out about this battery function, and the people clamoring to 3 to 4 hours, is that what impacts battery life?
Yeah, software, right? Yeah. There are things at lower levels in software like retries, right? The game controller, and I wish Deli was here because he could probably confirm. My assumption on the game controller software is, from what I've seen, I don't believe that there is any type of ACNAC between the console and the controller. ACNAC is something that we do in software where I send you a signal and you send me a signal back, right, verifying that's the signal that I sent. In order to cut down on what I call the chattiness between two pieces of hardware, we will do things like we'll put a checksum in there so that they can bounce a number that is calculated from the other numbers in the signal, right, to verify that that's the right thing, or in a lot of ways that we do things, we talk about best effort, right? So for example, email. Email is best effort. There is no service level agreement, right, in the email exchange, right? An email is transmitted, and in most cases, you simply assume that the email gets to the other end. Now, Outlook does some things like it allows you to do, I forget what exactly the function is, because it's as an etiquette thing, I personally think it's really obnoxious, but where you can get an indicator when somebody has received, right, and opened up an email. But in most cases, the email standard specification is written around best effort. And so I think that's also how controllers work. So my point is that the number of retries, right, that are associated with a controller, or how it handles error processing, et cetera, all of those things are part of the software package. They're not complete and done yet. And clearly, because the DualSense Edge has additional componentry and additional features in it, that software is not the exact same as what's running for the DualSense controller now. There's firmware that goes on the controller. Those things aren't complete. Those things are going to impact battery life. But on top of that, we should know today, where we use a lot of battery-powered and rechargeable battery-powered hardware, you can't accurately test for duration, endurance of a battery until you've gone through a couple of charge, discharge, and recharge cycles. And those people who were at the hands-on preview obviously didn't get enough time to experience that. So, and again, all that's not to say, because here's the thing, oh, well, you're defending it. Oh, well, you're saying we shouldn't worry. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that you can complain about it, but you're complaining about it on the back of incomplete information. And so for you to try and double down on it and anchor yourself to it and say that, because of this is the reason why I'm outraged, that's just fake and false, right? If you can definitely take a hard line that says, my expectation is that battery life for this product is at a minimum the same as it is for the DualSense, and declare that it's a binary for you. And if it doesn't last at least that long that you're out, I would hope you would couple that to, because of the way I use my PlayStation 5, maybe I would consider that valid, but most people don't. Another thing that I would tag onto this, as I talked to somebody about today, let's also talk about what it would mean for the DualSense Edge to have longer battery life. Right, battery capacity and battery life is pretty tightly coupled to size. Over periods of time, you get evolution of the technology that allows the same milliamp hours, right, of battery to go into a battery of the same size. But typically, within a short development time span, like they've had for the PlayStation 5, you're not going to get the size of the battery down, right? So for the DualSense Edge to have longer battery life, it would have to, the battery would have to be larger. And in fact, therefore, the controller would have to be larger, because the controller has extra componentry in it, in addition, right, beyond the DualSense. And so there's probably not a way to get all of that down into the exact same form factor. Now, controllers are typically engineered to ergonomically match, right, what the companies think is the mainstream user base, right, which is why the PlayStation for years, which was in many ways centrally designed around players of smaller hands, right, has typically been smaller, right? And that's a drumbeat that they changed with the PlayStation 5, and that controller is slightly larger. So
yeah, I was not a big fan of the DualShock controllers. Did not like them.
No, I've always preferred the Xbox controllers.
Yes, the Xbox controllers were always my go-to up until this generation. I would say for me, it's I like both controllers probably equally now at this point. I do like the haptics that the new feature sets that the DualSense has over what Xbox is offering. But in terms of just feel, weightiness, I love both controllers. I think both controllers are great. So, I'm not. I know Forte said he likes the off-centered thumbsticks. I don't know if that's if I care enough about that, but I think they're both great controllers. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, I personally do. I haven't liked the PlayStation controller until the DualSense.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I agree. Like DualSense is the first PlayStation controller that I've actually liked ever in 25 years.
So my only point in all that is, I think I'm starting to see some people echo it in the chat. It's look. You can have concerns about the controller. You can, if the battery life really impacts your use case, you can be upset about it. But what you can't claim is that for a fact what the battery life on the controller is, and therefore you're way upset. And so, like I talked about to a person earlier today, a person said, what's wrong with criticizing Sony for a bad product? My problem is we don't know that it's a bad product.
Well,
we've heard one negative soundbite in pre-reviews, right? We haven't heard a complete review of the after-release product that's going to be actually on the market.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, people are drawing to, and again, this happens, and this is this is something that certain podcasts do. They will go out there and they'll with incomplete information arrive to some kind of final judgment conclusion about a product, and you can't do that. You just can't. Look, and again, we're not saying, and I don't know how many times I had to say this today. I'm not saying you can't complain about the battery life or make commentary on it. The problem is that people are just taking this one flaw, if you want to call it a flaw, or this one thing, and they're arriving to the conclusion that this makes the DualSense Edge unusable, bad, overpriced. And none of them have read the actual previews. The previews have actually, and I took the time and read the previews. The previews have been very consistent in that many of the previews love the customization features of the DualSense. But they're also saying, look, this is a control that's not for everyone. And I'm going to go out there on a limb, Hamp. I'm going to guess that some people that are commenting on, oh, this is overpriced, this isn't it. They're probably not the people that were going to buy this controller anyway, because they're going to be people that are going to like look at this controller and be like, wait a minute, like let's say the battery life is 5 hours. They're going to say, well, wait a minute, I game for X amount of hours, but maybe it's a pass for me. I'm going to go through a third-party Pro controller on PlayStation, which they are, and that's the other thing too. Happy, you brought up a great point. Like, as much as the complaining and the jump to conclusions mats and everything that comes out, they also don't offer solution. It's like bitch, but no solution. And there's always solutions, typically, for consumers. And there's plenty of options out there. I think you may have tweeted out a link of other third-party pro-style controllers for the PlayStation 5 that are out there. Actually, I did see someone say, you know what, I'm going to pass on the PlayStation. I forget who it was. Somebody tweeted this out. I'm going to pass on the DualSense Edge. I'm going to go with this third-party controller for PlayStation 5.
Yeah, so I always love how people, get themselves in the line of fire in the chat. So I never liked any PlayStation controller till the DualSense. LOL, straight cap. So straight poison TV, I've just spent 45 minutes sitting here saying that no one should be throwing the shade that they're throwing at the DualSense Edge because they have incomplete information. And your response to that is to accuse me of capping, I guess, for Xbox, because I have personally never liked a PlayStation controller. So you're one of the people that we're talking about, right? It seems to be impossible for you to believe or understand that there would be people who don't like the things that you like. I've just never liked the design on the PlayStation controller, mostly because of what I've said, because I have large hands and they have typically been small controllers, whereas Xbox originally came out with the Duke, right, which was a really big controller, and that's been personally more to my liking.
By the way, I did not like the Duke. The Duke, I was like, no, this is not it, Microsoft. I don't like the Duke. No, the Controller S was the nice, it was the nice compromise for the original Xbox, and that gave birth to what we know today as the the series controllers. But yeah, and that's kind of weird. Like people this drives me crazy, Hamp. Like, it's a very elementary level argument. That's cap. I mean,
yeah,
that's an argument I would expect, a response that I would expect my 8-year-old to say to me.
Middle, yeah.
But there's something else in the live chat, right? El Chilango says, BRAP, the problem is every week you guys talk like your podcasts only matter, and you guys always write and blame Xbox for everything. I got to be honest, I don't know what you're talking about, El Chilango. Like, we've never said that we're always right. What we are saying is we offer a different perspective than what's out there. That's it. Yeah, fact, and I don't know why you say we blame Xbox for everything. I mean, I don't know where that, like, you could provide some specific examples. Yeah, I don't. And we don't think that we're always right. I've even said sometimes, we get it wrong sometimes. I want to get the super chat real quick from Sir X-Man because I don't want to forget this. $2 super chat from Sir X-Man. Thank you, Sir X-Man. Says, who remembers only corded controllers in here? I remember we only had cords.
Yeah, so do I.
For controllers.
One thing that I wanted to pick at was what you said before, right? Is the podcasts who are running around with the predetermined narrative, regardless of the facts, and cherry picking the ones that support their case. One of the things that's kind of apparent, right, is what you mentioned, right, which is that they're not really in the addressable market for this type of controller, because people who were would have been paying attention to what's been going on with controller technology, would have been aware of those alternatives, and would have been able to inform their audience, right, of those. So so to go through again, kind of a little bit of what I mentioned last night, right? This is a high precision, highly configurable controller. In my opinion, right? If I were looking at this from a product owner perspective, the only people who really need this controller are people who play, PvP shooters, and either, if they're not playing, necessarily professionally competitive, but they just play at a level where they actually care, right? And they want the best possible competitive experience for them. People who care about their racing games and the precision in those, whether or not they're playing PvP, or just love racing games, and high precision, right? And want that level of control. For those types of users and consumers, would have been asking, where is the high precision option for the PlayStation 5 from the beginning of the generation? And those people would have probably picked up on articles that went around that talked about the point in the timeline when PlayStation licensed the DualSense technology out to third parties so that they could make those controllers. Those people would have been paying attention to vendors like Scuf, and said, hey, Scuf made controllers for Xbox One and PlayStation 4. Let me keep my eye on their product line and see when they do the same thing for the PlayStation 5. Those consumers probably would have tracked and been aware of the other third-party vendors who have since started making high-precision third-party controllers to fit that use case in that niche of customer. Let me also add that the people who need this controller are a niche of customer. This controller is not made for the mainstream PlayStation 5 player, because the mainstream PlayStation 5 player doesn't need a $200 controller, particularly given that the DualSense is a pretty damn solid controller with a lot of innovative technology in it. There aren't, the vast majority of the PlayStation 5 user base doesn't actually need it. It's difficult to understand how people are kind of interpreting the information when they're not able to understand the market because they project their own requirements onto how everybody should view it.
Yeah, people want to know, what they want to generally know. So they're saying when Sony introduced the DualShock back in 96, 97, there was no better option at the time. So what do you prefer over that? Yeah, there's no third-party option for PlayStation, but I didn't care for it. Nintendo's controller was a little bit bigger, a little bit weightier, the N64. I think the Sega controller for the what was it? What was the Sega console back then? I'm gonna say the Dreamcast, but it's the Sega Saturn. I prefer that design better. Royal Boy with the go ahead, Hamp.
I know. I was gonna say, if Ben says, if you're asking in reference to my comment, I've never liked a PlayStation controller until the DualSense, and you're saying, well, what about 96 or 97? First of all, you assume that I had a PlayStation 1. Which I did, but that was still an assumption on your part. But I mean, the controller was fine, but also I didn't have a PlayStation 1 right off the bat. I actually had a Sega Saturn first, and so preferred that controller. And even though I used the PlayStation 1 controller when I eventually swapped them out, I still felt that control was small, and I didn't like the side-by-side analog arrangement. Just never have.
Yeah, I didn't like the side by side either when they released that for the DualShock 1. I just wasn't necessarily a fan of it when that happened, and I remember my thumb slipping off it quite a bit. But anyhow, Royal Boyle with 78 with the $5 super chat. Thank you, Royal Boyle. Appreciate that, man. Says always here to support BRAP, man. Just want to say happy holidays and hope you all enjoy yourselves. Thank you for that, Royal Boyle. Happy holidays to you and yours as well. I really appreciate you and the super chat. Thanks so much, man.
And what did it say? Eric 83 didn't Microsoft make it so? I think we're pulling this out and parsing it a little too refinedly over one simple comment that I just prefer the Xbox controller. I don't know that we need to nuke it out any further than that. Yes, they have since made a smaller controller than the Duke, but my point is that when I went in day one and bought my Xbox on launch day, the controller that it came with was the Duke, and that made me immediately acclimate and enjoy the Xbox experience, because one of the things that came with it was a controller that I preferred.
Yeah, again, I'm not with you on the Duke controller, Hamp, but look,
no, I understand.
I like this. I like the Xbox. When they redesigned it, and they had the the controller S. I thought that was a great And then they started bundling it, then they just continued the Duke. Yeah.
And the size is one aspect. I'm like Forte. I just prefer the offset thumbsticks. One of the things that if we need to get into this level of detail, one of the things that bugs me is, for me, over time as I'm gaming, my thumbs tend to slip on those side by side thumbsticks a little, and eventually I hit a point in a game where my inner thumbs actually bump up against each other, and I have to kind of lift them off the controller and readjust. It's a minor thing. Again, it's why I don't project on everyone and say, oh, nobody should like the PlayStation controller. Everybody should view it the way I do. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying my personal preference is for the Xbox style controller.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. I hear you. God, there's one more thing I wanted to. Oh my God, I just lost my train of thought, man.
Hey, Bender. I said what I said. If you want to keep digging at it for whatever reason, I don't know. I don't know whether you're trying to get me to, I don't know, admit to some PII on air so you can compromise accounts. I don't know. I don't know why it's flummoxing you so much. I just prefer the Xbox controller.
Yeah, Bender. I don't know why you're doing the mental gymnastics. To be frank. I don't understand it. Like, I don't think it's that big of a deal. This
is kind of the defense that I see from PlayStation fans who are like, "Oh my God, how could you possibly not like everything about the PlayStation?"
Yeah, it's
if that's a reality that's tough for you to understand, then just don't try and understand it. Just I said what I said and move on.
Oh my God. It's like, dude, yes, people can actually prefer things over things that didn't exist. That happens a lot, by the way, Bender. I don't know how old you are, but in my lifetime, I can think of certain instances where that happened quite a bit. I'll leave it at that, though.
Yeah, Jason is asking about the Steam Deck layout. I'm actually good with the Steam Deck layout. Again, it's not solely that the sticks are horizontally arranged, right? But it's the fact that those sticks on the PlayStation controller are horizontally arranged and in closer proximity to each other. So I've had a good time playing on the Steam Deck in a lot of cases with games like Ollie Ollie World, and maybe even to a certain extent Uncharted. I actually feel like the controls are, I don't know, slightly more, intuitive, native, organic, whatever term you want to use. When I'm playing games that, can use those kind of finely grained controls, racing games too.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed that layout and had no problem with it.
So here's kind of the example of what happens. Like, Bender is doing the mental gymnastics right now. And he's saying that's like someone saying they didn't like the record player 1977 because it wasn't an iPod.
Yeah, he's one of these guys who, and you guys get me. So you guys have learned where to poke me in between the ribs to try and get a rise out of me. So
he's saying I'm just having fun with you guys. Well, Bender. I mean, look, man. I don't know that. That's the problem. Like, people actually are saying those things. Or say those things, or take that approach, and they aren't joking. So,
right. So yeah. You're right, Bender. I've seen you in chat before. I need to start writing your guys' name down on paper so I can spool myself down before I spool myself up. But T-Rock makes a good comment. I've never seen so many adults complain about something they were never going to buy, not just this controller, and that's a really good point. A lot of the people that are out there running with the narratives were never in the market for this controller. As I talked about before, they're not the type of player who spends a lot of time playing on PlayStation 5 anyway. In fact, I would, just throw out the accusation that I don't. It wouldn't surprise me that they're the type of people who buy certain things just so that they can shit talk them. But they don't put a lot of time in on their PlayStation 5. Again, that type of user doesn't need this controller. As we talked about last night, you don't need this controller to play God of War Ragnarok. You don't need that precision. So, those people weren't in the market for this anyway. But like I said, every week, there are only 7 plots to the gaming discourse on social media, just like there are only 7 plots in Hollywood, and people make slight tweaks and variants on those every week to have something to complain about. And this is just the one for this week.
I mean, you're not lying. Every week it's like, it's never like, oh, I'm enjoying this game. This game is great.
Right.
It's never that. Sometimes it is, but it's far few in between. It's controversy. I got to be angry about something, and I got to, shake my fists at these greedy corporations and I got to do this and I got to do that. It's never about, oh man, I can't wait for this game. Or I played this new game this week and it was amazing. I didn't think I was going to like it, but here's why I like it. Oh, I'm looking forward to this game coming out. It's never that. I should say it's never that. It's there's not enough of that.
Yeah. And, the couple of things that I pointed out today were the, some of the hypocrisies running around in the dialogue, right? People say, well, the Elite controller has this battery life and that. And I think I mentioned on the podcast last night, I'm actually not certain, but Microsoft has extended the warranty on the Elite Series 2 controller from 90 days to a year, right? Because of the volume of warranty calls, right, and complaints about the hardware reliability that they've gotten. That is not a no-cost move that a corporation does, right? That's not a thing that people do, where there's just smoke and not some fire, right? So, and I'm not trying to make a comment to the extent of it as being, something where like 50% of Elite Series 2 purchasers should expect to have some issue. But, yeah. But clearly, right, there's a certain volume of issue. So again, I don't think that you can stand on the Microsoft side of the field and say, battery life is a big deal. Look at our Elite Series 2 controller. When it has such big maintenance issues. The other thing I'll mention is, again, people are throwing shade at the battery life on the DualSense Edge, and again, this is not something that's impacted me, but again, this is that level of self-awareness that a person should have from the way other consumers on the market view things. The Xbox Series X is a $500 console. It comes with a controller, just like the PlayStation 5 does. The PlayStation 5's controller has a rechargeable battery. The Xbox Series X comes packed in with a controller with an empty battery bay, expecting you to power it with AA batteries. And for you to equip it with rechargeable batteries, that's an aftermarket thing that you have to go purchase yourself. Now, again, you could say that's not that big a deal. You can't compare that to whatever. My point is understand that there are other people who may view that differently, and understand that maybe you're not on the firmest soil and that you may be throwing rocks while you yourself are in a glass house, right? At making a big deal out of DualSense Edge battery life that hasn't been quantified yet, that hasn't been tested yet, and that you can't tell the full extent of the impact of.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Ham. And that's kind of, again, and that's the point, that people are drawing to these conclusions with small bits and pieces of information, or they're not self-aware enough to know that this product may be for someone else, that there's actually people out there that actually want this, that they may look at this and be like, you know what, I'm okay with the battery life. I'm okay with the $200 price tag because I want a Pro controller for PlayStation 5, for my PlayStation. So Ryan says today on BRAP Controller Wars. That's pretty funny. The other thing, Hamp, is, and I'm sorry, Hamp, do you have any other thoughts, comments on the battery gate, as I call it?
Yeah, just my final thing, again, right? Gamers should allow for the state of two beings to exist, right? It's totally feasible and possible that a PlayStation person could buy the DualSense Edge and say, look, I will readily admit that this is not as good as the Elite Series 2, right? Particularly from a battery life perspective. But it's the only option, it's the only first-party option that I have, and I'm okay with that, right? I'd like it to be better, but this is what I'm going to go with for the time being, And maybe they make that decision because, there are several other options. I've had many times when I've had things in an ecosystem where I've been like, I've decided that I wanted to stay in that ecosystem because I felt like that was the most reliable performance. Other times I've said, it's absolutely ridiculous how poorly the Samsung Galaxy Series watch stays connected to Samsung Galaxy Series phones, right? So I pair a different brand name of watch with those phones. So, just there are other possible outcomes than, this is, the this ain't it mentality.
Yep. No, absolutely. Well, and that's the easy answer. Cap, this ain't it. That's the easy answer. Anyhow, one thing I wanted to comment on too, Hamp, is and I know we talked about a little bit. We talked about this a little bit on the show yesterday. I was thinking more about, and I had a great conversation with a very popular podcaster, by the way. I won't name his name, but somebody that I talked to, probably not enough. Like we were talking about the whole Xbox not being at the Game Awards, and he was kind of giving me some insight into what happened, and my response was like, where was the plan B then? If you're banking on these things to happen, they didn't happen. Shouldn't you have a plan B? And it made me think about our conversation about with regards to hey, what's up, Dragonheart Yobi? Great to see you. Hope you have a happy holiday as well, sir. T-Rock, by the way, I meant to wish you a happy holidays as well too, sir. We need to play some Ghost of Tsushima, that multiplayer. I forget that multiplayer mode, man. We haven't ran that in a while, but and get some Fortnite. But it reminded me of like when you made that commentary, Hamp, of okay, Todd Howard gives a release date, then he pushes said release date back, but there's no plan B. There's nothing. There's nothing in the production pipeline to offset that loss. And at the Game Awards again, and we talked about this yesterday. Like there's a rumor they're gonna have a show in January, which I'm happy as a gamer to see something from them. But I do think it's a missed opportunity for them to not be at the Game Awards, especially when you revealed your new console, the Series X. I had the same conversation with this individual today, where he was like, "Hey, BRAP, like they set kind of an expectation at the Game Awards. They had Perfect Dark reveal, they had Hellblade 2, they revealed their current generation console at the show, so there was kind of that expectation, and then nothing, and then then go ahead, man."
Well, Plan B is Activision.
Well,
right?
That was yes,
That's the answer to all the problems, right?
No,
let's just accomplish that, and that will fix everything.
Yeah, and that was the Plan B, but Plan B. So there should be a Plan C then. There should be a Plan C. And
I say that facetiously about that being the fix of the Game Awards. My point is, this buy-in to the notion that, if we just acquire Activision, then everything with the world will be set right. And I'm like, that's not, I don't buy that.
But I think for the short term, for the the Xbox fan base, it probably does. I mean, think about it. I mean, from a mindshare perspective, you get Call of Duty this year. Let's say the deal went through, and you get Call of Duty and Game Pass this fall. That's buying you more time, right?
Well, you don't, because there is no Call of Duty release for next year. I mean, the only thing it solves is it.
That's right. I meant like you're right. Call of Duty in general. You get that to kind of puff out your chest and say, look, we have the largest, most popular gaming console franchise, whatever, on Game Pass.
And then you hope there's a big swing in membership on the Game Pass. You hope that that you get a lot of people signing up in order to obtain Xbox Cloud Gaming. I would expect that what you would do is you would do something with Xbox Cloud Gaming next year. Now, this will actually be interesting, to decouple it from Game Pass Ultimate, because now you're entering a world where what you want to do is you want to push Xbox Cloud Gaming out to people on mobile without giving them the barrier to entry to climb over of the $15 monthly subscription price, right? And maybe you're just planning on that being a Warzone play, since that's free to play. But what I would expect for at some point down the road, maybe as early as next year, is that we'll start seeing Xbox Cloud Gaming rolling out as maybe a separate subscription SKU in other territories. To, like I say, because if you're a person joining the Xbox ecosystem from mobile, then you don't have any need for games on Xbox or games on PC, right, through Game Pass. You just want them delivered over the cloud. And so, you should make those available to those customers you're so trying to reach, right, the other 3 billion players on the planet, without giving them that curb that they have to surmount.
Yeah. And Let me grab the super chat real quick from Sir X-Man. Sir X-Man, thank you for that $5 super chat again. I really appreciate it. Says, did we have a battery gate at the launch of PS3 and Xbox 360? I can't believe we're back to that again. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I don't recall a battery gate during the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 era. Do you, Hamp?
No, the only thing I remember, because that was the first generation with wireless controllers, right? Everything was corded up till then. So the only thing I remember was, again, the initial outcry about the thing that I pointed out before, which is right that the Xbox came with a controller expecting you to power with 2 AA batteries. And I think when that initially launched, that the Play and Charge kit, I don't know that was available at launch, or that we necessarily even knew it was coming. So I think we were a little bit more salty, right, about AA batteries. I think even for a while I used those goofy, like, rechargeable, what are they called? Are they nickel cadmium alkali batteries or whatever?
Yeah,
that you had to have like a battery pack.
Plug in the wall.
I hated that thing.
I used to do that too. I used to plug in the wall. My preference is to not use batteries. That's just, I just got tired of swapping them out, having to buy batteries, and then forgetting to buy batteries, and then not having extra batteries. So the easiest solution for me was that I needed to just get the charge packs and just keep them charged. And it's easy for me. It's low maintenance for me. I always, keep a set of controllers charged. I only have 2 PlayStation 5 DualSense controllers. I think I have like 6 Xbox controllers, which that probably shouldn't surprise anyone. I feel like a lot of Xbox owners probably have multiple Xbox controllers. They do a really good job at putting out some nice looking controllers, and I tend to buy them. So, yeah, I just stopped using the batteries. And I know there's kind of a big shout out to Optimus Code. I think there was that debate with him about batteries versus charge packs, and I think he was not a battery person, if I remember. But anyhow,
So one thing I would have mentioned, just look, we've mentioned this before, as many kind of little nits and speed bumps as we've had along the way. In general, the quality of the chat is just incredibly improved over the last several months. There are numerous really good questions being asked in chat that we just I've tried to get around to, like this is the first time that I remember that, like, the number of questions it's been impossible to get to. Yeah,
so real quick, I mean, you're right. Like, there's some good questions. Like Bender Strings, actually, and I've seen this question posed a bit, and I think the problem sometimes when people pose this question, that it just goes into console warring, and then it just gets flushed in the toilet. But I think this is a fair point. Bender Strings. He said, my biggest concern is with Microsoft acquiring ABK. The deal gets approved. Where does it stop? Is Microsoft just going to hoover up all the major publishers? That doesn't seem good for gaming. I don't think that's an unreasonable question to ask. I think it's a fair question.
No, not at all. I mean, we kind of walked through that scenario the other night, right? So if Activision, and now I'm thinking of, and I'm sorry that I often draw these analogies to movies. I'm thinking of, do you remember? Let me do a callback. Do you remember Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom?
Yeah, who doesn't remember that? The chilled monkey brains?
Yes. So do you remember the scene when Mola Ram is I think it was when he's getting ready to rip out Indy's heart, and he does this big long speech about how Kali is going to come to how they and their Indian god are going to come to power, and he talks about then the Hebrew god will fall. And this is kind of what I'm thinking of when this question gets asked, right? I think about somebody going, first we'll buy Activision, and then EA will fall, and then we'll gobble up Take-Two, right? But you're absolutely right. I think from a regulatory perspective, that's the question, right? If Microsoft buys Activision, and in the scenario we walked through, Microsoft buys Activision, they're then able to widen the distribution of COD, right? Put it on Nintendo Switch, put it on mobile, put it wherever, put it in Game Pass. Which
was that the Indiana Jones with Kid?
Yes, yeah, the
Dr.
kid who
Jones!
just came back.
Dr. Jones!
For short round. But Indy, cover your heart.
Yeah, Indy, cover your heart.
Yeah. So they get Activision.
What?
They push wider distribution of COD, which they're able to do.
I'm sorry, I don't mean derail the conversation. I have to ask you this question. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Better Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark or Temple of Doom?
Oh, Raiders. Oh, the ranking, in my mind, the ranking goes Last Crusade, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom. Now, my personal feeling is Temple of Doom was just a different movie, but overall, I mean, in my opinion,
I love the face. I love the face melting when they opened the Ark, though. That was like, at the time, like when when we saw that in movies, it was so like, wow, just the special effects.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know we're digressing, but look, you guys who are newer, like T-Rock, you remember, like the notion back in that time, the notion that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg were pairing together to create a movie was just mind-blowing. That in and of itself, right, was just absolutely like just slobber knocking, knocked us on the floor.
No, it really, because it did. I mean, you had Steven Spielberg who did E.T. and then
Close Encounters,
and then you had Lucas who, Star Wars.
Yep. So sorry. Yep. So back to the scenario. So and I know, and then Immortal Black is asked us specifically to answer his question. So Microsoft buys COD, widens its distribution, which they're able to do by engaging in loss lead practices because they have the financial strength and the cash reserves to do so. Now you say that they're doing that. EA can't do that. PlayStation can't do that. Activision can't do it now, right? Which is why they haven't widened the distribution of COD, because they can't afford to do those things at a loss. Now, Microsoft is able to do that. Do you look at that and say that's an unfair advantage because the other vendors can't do it? And then if Microsoft is able to do that, the question I've said is, okay, how is that? I think the question is how is that good for gaming, or is it that bad for gaming? Yeah, I mean, how is that good for EA and what they need to do next with Battlefield? How is that good for, Battlefield, Apex? How is that good for Ubisoft, right, in Rainbow Six? And how is that good for somebody like the guys who do Splitgate, who have, don't have the financial backing and had to go get venture capital, right? How do you ever get something like that on the market again if the air in the room that's needed to fuel something like that just gets snuffed out, right? And again, so... And by
the way, we're not saying that is absolutely 110% going to happen.
No, we're saying that's the question that has to be asked.
Yes, that's the question that has to be, and I think that's a fair question to ask.
Right, and then to put it back to that scenario, right? Then when all that happens, right? If EA becomes beleaguered, if Ubisoft becomes beleaguered, if Take-Two becomes beleaguered, and I don't think Take-Two will become beleaguered, but I'll just throw them in there as one of the bigs. Then those people start looking to be acquired, and they start looking to be acquired by a $1 trillion mega corporation, right? Now those companies are now in the hunting target site for an Amazon, for a Google, for, not an Apple, because Apple can't get out of their own way when it comes to gaming, but you get for an NVIDIA,
but
which I don't think is too far.
Apple's making money though. In fairness, Apple's making money with their Apple Arcade.
Yeah. Apple and Google are in the top, somewhere 5 to 8 of revenue getters from gaming.
Apple's printing hamp money right now. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
So Immortal Black. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. You got a super chat?
Yeah, we'll get the super chat by T-Rock 40 with the $2 super chat. T-Rock, one of our mods. By the way, T-Rock, great dude. I gamed with him quite a bit. So, if you want to give him a follow on YouTube, not YouTube, on Twitter, you can. But yeah, $2 super chat from T-Rock. He says Last Crusade, Raiders, Temple, Doom. Forget CS. Crystal Skulls, whatever it was.
Yeah, I don't even count that.
I wasn't a fan of that. Mine's Raiders, Temple, Last Crusade, in that order.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Really? I mean, Last Crusade wasn't. I mean, it's nostalgia for me. Like I just remember watching Raiders as a young kid. I remember going to see Temple with my uncle. I remember, I think that's probably, I'd probably rank that because it's probably a little bit of nostalgia factor to that for me, at least.
All right. We'll have to get into that one later. So, and T-Rock also correctly calls out, I didn't say Jaws because as I was talking, I was
don't get me wrong. Sean Connery, but I'm sorry, Sean Connery was great in Last Crusade.
Sean Connery was great in everything.
Yeah, that was kind of like it was, look, at the time, I was 12 years old. I mean, it was a big deal to have Indiana Jones drop in 89, because I want to say that Batman dropped that summer too, I think. The first Batman.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was a huge summer. I remember the summer blockbusters. I mean, that was huge. But yeah, that's why I don't know, man. I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
So Immortal Black's question. Immortal Black says, and shout out to Falky who's in the chat. Immortal Black says, hello, nice salute. Now, Immortal Black, you asked us to answer this question, so I'm going to try and answer. Nice solution. If game takes time from the incubator, what could Xbox do, or better yet, what could any publisher do? So, Immortal Black, I think I think what this question is trying to ask is what I just talked through. So I think we did wind up answering it. I think what you're asking is, if Microsoft becomes this huge gravimetric force on the market by the acquisition of Activision, then for a small independent developer, right, which I think fits nicely with that scenario that I talked about with the guys who do Splitgate, right? Or even, I mean, how would you have a PUBG, right, come into being, right? If, like, am I going to take a risk and spend my time on an unknown, right, coming from some weird indie vector, or am I going to just play COD if I can access it, right, on Game Pass or for free, on a platform where COD hasn't even traditionally existed, right? And there's a fresh, hungry market of people looking for that content. So he says, what could Xbox do, or better yet, what could any publisher do? Yeah, I hope that answered your question, Immortal Black.
Yeah, and I want to grab a super chat from $5 super chat from Lord Metroid. By the way, Metroid, great franchise. Sony and Nintendo are far better than Microsoft at releasing exclusives almost every year, and with less resources, Xbox has to improve on this. I don't disagree with that. I mean, look, they did have a good 2021. I'll give them that. Albeit Halo Infinite was an issue. But like when I had this conversation with this individual today, this podcaster, I said, look, for me, it just seems like they take 3 steps forward and they take 4 steps back. The consistency is not there. There's no plan Bs. And it's just like, you look at like what Sony does. And when Sony doesn't have, their first party studios releasing their AAA games, or in between those releases, what do? They go out, they strike third-party deals. They have these marketing deals. So you have like Final Fantasy VII Remake. You have now coming up, you have Forspoken. You have Final Fantasy 16. You have the sequel to the Final Fantasy VII Remake. So they make these deals, and it's like, for me, it's, and I think you've mentioned this too, Hamp. It's like, where's the plan B? Like it makes me scratch my head a little bit. Like, okay, like what's the philosophy of Microsoft? Like, what's happening? Like why aren't they anticipating that these games could be delayed, and that if they are going to be delayed, let's have a plan B. Or if we know that there's a gap in release between one first party game to the next first party game, that there isn't something there, especially with Game Pass. There isn't something there to hold people over until like the next big thing releases for them. So yeah, and that's where I think that's where I'd like to see the consistency, or like to see them do. I mean, they did it with the 360 generation, but again, I understand that Phil doesn't like making those deals. He's been on record, I don't like to make those deals. Well, it's like, why can't you make those deals? I understand you don't like it, but then what's the alternative? Not having an exclusive, any exclusive content released on your platform?
I mean, I don't know. My own perspective is a Scotia angled off from that, right? I guess I isolate my disappointment in Microsoft to first party, right? The third party, I mean, for me, right, from my perspective, right, and this may be the why, right? Because
I'm sorry, real quick, Ham. Yeah, I mean, so T-Rox's Game Pass is literally the eggs in the basket metaphor. Actually, I used that metaphor today when speaking to this individual. I said, look, they put all their eggs in a basket on Halo Infinite, on this deal going through, on Starfield. But I don't think you could do that. I don't think you can put your eggs in a basket and be like, yeah, you know what? We got these games coming up, and there's an opportunity. There's always a chance for a game to be delayed. Where's the plan B? Where's the foresight to say, you know what, let's line up, let's talk to some of our partners, let's get some games in Game Pass, or let's get some more, timed exclusives to to offset any delays in games, or to offset the gap that we have between our first party stuff.
Yeah. Do you want to grab the super chat before I go?
Sir X-Man with the $2 super chat. Thank you again, Sir X-Man. I appreciate that. Happy holidays to you, by the way. Microsoft has always had a slow, methodical method. Thank you for that super chat. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with you that is where they are now. I don't think that that's the intention for the future. And so let me wind back a little bit to what I was saying before, because wait,
Amp. You said you don't think, you said that's where they are now, right? But that's not the future?
Correct.
So you know what that is, Hamp? That's cap.
Yeah. Mine's a little more substantiated than the hope year after year after year. So let's just take it for the sake of argument, like as a crazy notion, that the way I think about a part of my gaming, is signifying of like the Xbox user base, right? And so when you get outside of first party and you start talking about the third party deals, right? Me personally, I don't care about Final Fantasy, right? So I can kind of give a crap that like Sony goes off and make deals for Final Fantasy or JRPGs.
Yeah, but it's still a buffer though. It's still something else they can put on their plate in between first party releases.
Yeah, let me finish going through. So, but my point is that Microsoft is bringing third-party deals to the Xbox platform, right, through Game Pass. Now, again, you can have a toss-up argument of valuation based on who those titles resonate with, and that's going to wind up in kind of a onesie-twosie back and forth of, well, I like this, I like that, I don't mind this, I don't mind that, right? And I just, that winds up to me being a toss-up. So I just don't like the fact that Sony is bringing third-party deals and exclusive to its platform don't really matter to me personally. What makes the PlayStation platform attractive to me is the first-party stuff. And with the exception of, like, if you look at an edge case like Insomniac, right, where they were third party when they published Spider-Man, but then they were acquired, right, and now that's in the Sony field. So third party to third party, I'm relatively okay with what Microsoft's doing. Where I think they're trying to head, and what I've talked about, and I've used this to kind of knock some of the legs out from another table of the Xbox fandom who keep talking about, well, next year's the year. I totally agree with you. In order to get to, and I apologize for people who have heard this before, right? In order to get to deterministic outputs, right, which you have to have for a subscription service where there's a regular cadence and drumbeat of content going into that subservice to keep people engaged. If you're going to do that on the back of first party, then there's got to be redundancy in the production pipeline, right? I totally agree with you. There has to be a plan B. You have to actually be overproducing, right?
That's my point,
And so what I've talked about on the show before, right, is that what I expect is if everything goes according to plan and right, then let's say they do acquire Activision. Now you're going to go to 38 studios, right? I expect that if I'm in charge of the production pipeline and the production pipeline's performing, I should actually get to a point where I have to start holding games back. I should actually get to a point where I have a game or two coming out each quarter where I say, pump the brakes on that. I don't know that I need to release that and put that in Game Pass right now. I'm going to hold that until holiday season. I'm going to hold that to a weak point, right, in the release schedule, like in the last couple weeks of August or something, where there's something for me to be gained, right, by releasing that thing. And I'll come up with other rules. I've talked about this need for Microsoft games to get to some level of corporate governance, right, where there's rules, right, the rules of engagement that kind of characterize exactly how they're going to go about building this business. I might have things where I say, when I start overproducing, I'm going to hold games back sometimes for release if they're not my prize property. But I'm only going to hold them back for X period of time, right? I'm going to have some threshold where I only hold them for a maximum of 6 months, or I only hold them until a given release year. That's the way things should happen. But when I think the Xbox fandom kind of over predicts kind of what's coming down the pike, what I've said is based on where they are now, where they are underperforming and the production pipeline isn't achieving the velocity that it needs to, based on some calculations that I did from a software development perspective, I predict they're not going to start hitting on all those cylinders until 2025, right? So I don't think that we're going to have a fully fleshed pipeline until at least the back half of 2024, where things are coming out at the level of frequency that aligns with what they've said is their own strategy, right? Based on where studios are and where they're still kind of recovering.
So, Hamp, what you're saying is we just need to wait.
I didn't say that. I said, what I said is you're going to wait.
Well, I mean, 2025 is 3 years from now.
But I'm not saying that from a marketing. The difference is when I say it, I say based on the software engineering reality and the total amount of code that needs to be produced and the total number of employees and budget that I estimate they're going to have, you're going to have to wait to 2025 based on the math. What the Xbox fandom says is, just hold on, the games are coming. That's not what I'm saying, because I don't really care if people stay in the Xbox camp until then. What I'm saying is I would push back on the notion that anything is going to achieve this 1812 overture of fireworks right until the back half of 2024.
Gotcha. Yeah. No. Again, I just think that based on their output right now, that they should have had some plan Bs. I think Nulla Origin says, to be fair, Xbox only had 4 studios until 2018 when they started buying the world. 2018 was 4 years ago. With the COVID year in between, between games take around 5 years to make. I look, again, plan B. If you know that if COVID's hit, and there was an article, I keep citing this article, Imran Khan wrote this article, that he was talking to developers, and they were like, yeah, but Sony's outbidding Microsoft for third-party content. It's like, what?
Yeah.
So that's my point. I understand those things happen. The once in a lifetime pandemic, or once in a 100-year pandemic, but Sony was able to get content out too. So was Nintendo, and some of that content was third-party stuff. Partnerships with developers that they have relationships with. Locking those timed exclusives down with those deals aren't those deals cost money. They're paying for them. Why can't Microsoft do the same? Look, I understand those things that they just started buying studios 5 years ago, but again, plan B. That's my point. And my frustration has been, look, when they presented Game Pass in 2017, it was 2018 is when they started buying developers. 2017 was Game Pass, but when they unveiled Game Pass, I was like, oh, this, I bought it because I wanted, it made sense for me because it was like, okay, well, wait a minute. First party games, they're $60 a pop. And this is when games were $60. If I get 2 of those, I'm at my break even point for the subscription for the year. I'll take that. Plus whatever other games they sprinkle in, I'm good. And for me, that just hasn't happened. I don't even I use Game Pass once this year. No, I know everyone's use case is different. I get that. I'm just giving you my experience with Game Pass and my usage with Game Pass and where my perspective's coming from. But my thought would be, you have this new console out, you're trying to build out the service. I understand the first party some stuff's been delayed. Again, there should have been some kind of plan B, in my opinion. So
yeah. Like I said, I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying, I don't. I think maybe the vector or the notion of the plan B for us are different. What I'm saying is the plan B should have been. I mean, there shouldn't have been a need for a plan B because the first party studios should have been up to production cadence. And I think what I'm saying is given that they're not, I don't know that I have an argument for what they should do instead. I'm like, and maybe I'm just thinking about it from a software perspective. Like, look, once we're behind schedule, 9 women can't make a baby in 1 month, right? So it is what it is. It's going to take however long it's going to take. I've just tried to figure out, when that's going to be.
Yeah. Well, 2025 seems like a long time, Hamp. Let me ask you something, Hamp. Do you think, and I know with Starfield, do you think Starfield needs to hit? Like, does it need to have a certain level of quality associated to it? And again, I know quality is subjective. Well, I think there's certain instances where, well, let me back that question up a little bit. Do you think that this game needs to be a big release for Microsoft?
I mean, I guess in my mind, I don't think about it like that. The way I think about it is Starfield's going to be whatever it's going to be. And what it's going to be is it's going to be the magnum opus of Todd Howard's vision, right, in games. I wouldn't be surprised for Todd to kind of start heading for retirement after Starfield releases, and just kind of be a thought leader with regards to Elder. What am I saying? Elder Scrolls.
Elder Scrolls, yes.
Yeah, I'm getting that mixed up with Elder Scrolls and Elden Ring now. But
does this game need to be like that 95 Metacritic, commercial, like, because they big AAA game. They haven't had that this generation, really. I think for some people it does. My reality on Starfield is I think Starfield needs to be a thing, even though they've been acquired by Microsoft. I think Starfield needs to be a thing for Todd Howard and Bethesda more so than it needs to be a thing for Microsoft. There is no changing of the vector of what Starfield was ever going to be, right, based on the Microsoft acquisition. I have it, since they've been acquired, it's not like, has Todd sat down and done an interview with like Phil or Matt Booty? It's just been him, right? And other members of Bethesda. No, he did sit down with Phil and I think Matt Booty. I think when they announced the acquisition, I think was the last time.
Yeah, but I mean from a developer like a developer diary thing. So all those marketing pieces.
I'm not sure what they have. Yeah.
Yeah. So my point is, I haven't seen evidence of a lot of Microsoft DNA being injected into what Starfield was going to be based on the acquisition, right? I haven't seen any like evidence of a ton of collaboration or something between Bethesda and Microsoft, and Todd going into Phil's office and laying out the blueprint of Starfield and having the two of them collaborate right on wiring in changes right based on his or Matt Booty's right thought. I've seen a lot more closeness between, say, Matt Booty and Playground Studios since their acquisition, right, on what they were putting together, or Matt and Obsidian, right, and what their plans were, just because I've heard that spoken to about more. So I think Starfield was always on whatever trajectory it was going to be on, and the acquisition by Microsoft has done nothing other than, right, maybe provide money. So in my mind, Starfield's going to be what it was always going to be. If Starfield comes out and I don't know that it's going to be a 90 something on Metacritic. I think it's going to be maybe a mid to high 80s on Metacritic, because it's going to be a thing that's that Bethesda DNA that appeals to that demographic, right? I don't think it's going to be universally appealing. I think it'll probably maybe even have less reach than Elder Scrolls or Fallout. Because I just don't know that the gamer market, that the Xbox market is entirely wired for space exploration, which is a slightly unique design vector on top of kind of the normal stuff we're getting from Bethesda. So I don't think about it. I don't think about it in terms of it needing to be a hit. I think it needs to come out. I think that's the main thing, and I think it needs to be solid. I don't know that it needs to be. I don't know that it needs to be God of War. I don't know that it needs to be a contender for Game of the Year. I think it needs to have some buzz and be talked about. But I think from a business perspective, I think that's sufficient. It needs to grease the wheel.
And I think the buzz needs to be positive. That's kind of where I was going to. I think that the buzz needs to be positive because it's probably the first big AAA release for one of Microsoft's acquired studios. and something that's going to go in Game Pass. And I think that at least for the Xbox fan base to have that kind of game in Game Pass, and we talk about hope, maybe it gives them a little more hope, but I think the optics of it could be positive for Game Pass. Like, hey, look at this game that released on, in Game Pass, big AAA sci-fi experience. It's been well received. It's getting, industry accolades, award shows, whatever the case is, right? I think that the optics of it would be positive for Game Pass and for Microsoft first party. It has been 7 years though since Bethesda Game Studios released a game that was Fallout 4, and the Metacritic on that is 87 for that game. So, yeah.
Well, that's my thing, and why I temper expectations, and I talked about this a little bit with Halo Infinite, right? And I understand that people view Halo Infinite as a certain thing, but I said back before it released that my feeling was that people were pitting hopes and expectations too highly upon Halo Infinite. Now that doesn't have anything to do with my perspective on whether or not Halo Infinite has generated sufficient, multiplayer PvP content since then, but just in the launch window, right? I felt like the expectations were too high. I don't personally view consoles as being reliant on any one property. And my viewpoint of Starfield is, like I said, it needs to grease the wheel. To me, it's not positive. It's not super positive for Game Pass if Starfield comes out as a standalone in and of itself, unless there's a lot of things that it drags along with it, and there are a lot of things that it drags along with it that are in kind of that meatball area of the target of Metacritic, right? Starfield coming out with a bunch of mediocres dragged along behind it, I don't feel like does Game Pass a great deal. And by the same token, as far as what it does for the community, look, I mean, no offense to that community, but the crazies and the delusionals are going to believe whatever they want to believe, regardless. Like, Starfield could come out and be a 60-something on Metacritic, and that faction of the community will declare that it's biased media, unfair reviews, and Sony money hatting to get them low reviews. Right, so I can't use them as a rubric for what the results of Starfield are going to be, but my feeling is it needs to be an indicator of the production pipeline kind of cranking up to speed, and it needs to be a solid hit, right? That doesn't blow the roof off, but at least gets back to that Halo Infinite level, right? And I'm saying that from a review score perspective. And the other thing, the last thing I'll mention is, right, what I would say is, one thing I've been saying for the last couple of years is there's 3 Bs and a C, right, of developer studios that have lost their mojo, right? Bethesda, Blizzard, I just had this today, both Bethesda, Blizzard, BioWare, and CD Projekt Red. And those 4 studios need to do things to establish that they've got their mojo back. And then once they establish that, they can go on and go off and do, right, other things that will hopefully be back at the same caliber. So I agree with you, right? The last outing for Bethesda was not good. We haven't really seen them perform at their, legacy levels. Starfield needs to be a return to that at minimum. But again, I don't personally feel that it needs to be like a 90-something, thing that sits on top of the whole industry in next year's release calendar.
Look, I'm trying to look up the Metacritic for Skyrim. Let's see here. That was a 96.
Yeah, and I just feel like you're I don't know. I just feel like you're unlikely to see that type of phenomena again, right? Skyrim was an incredible splash on an industry that has significantly evolved since then, and I just don't know. And to be quite honest, oh boy, I'm gonna get some people riled up now. Right? God of War Ragnarok.
Choose your words wisely, Han.
God of War Ragnarok got a ton of praise, and well-deserved praise for its story and its narrative.
Here comes the but.
It features some gameplay mechanics that I would claim are indicative that the design ball has not moved that far downfield since 2018. So I just, if Starfield does that very same thing, if Starfield is like people say, if Starfield is Skyrim in space, I don't know that it gets that same leniency in media review scores.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, I get that's fair. I think Jeppy Gaming he may be agreeing. Skyrim was revolutionary at time for open world, but not now. No, that's I think it's fair, Hamp. I mean, I think that if it is Skyrim in space, it's like, what did it do to really push the needle?
Yeah, and Bama Hammer mentioned something. I'm going to get even a little more riskier as I step out here on the edge. He says, would a buggy Bethesda game like the older ones be acceptable now, though? Like it used to be the charm of the game, now maybe not. I will, at the risk of being wrong, I will step out and I will say a lot of the buggy Bethesda game reputation comes from how their games played on PlayStation, and Starfield won't be on PlayStation. So that knocks off a part of the legacy wedge of that bad reputation. But also from a technical perspective, that also means that they don't have as much optimization to do. They have theoretically fewer bugs to chase down from a platform vector. And they have more resources now, right? So, I agreed, right? The bugginess being charming will probably not be as tolerated now. But I'm also hoping that the surface area of that particular problem has maybe been lessened for them to a point where they can contend with it a little better now.
Yeah, I'd venture to say that if it's buggy, that you're going to hear more about it than in previous Bethesda releases, because of people's attitudes towards games that release buggy. I think we've seen kind of that more recently, and so, but I know that they call it the Bethesda charm. I don't think they unless the game outweighs the impacts of the bugs, the overall experience. I don't see them maybe getting a pass in reviews for that, but I could be wrong. But I hope that, and maybe the time that Todd Howard. I mean, you got to imagine there's a lot of pressure on him right now because this is his first new IP in 20 years. And I wonder how much. I wonder them, asking them or getting another year of development time under their belt. If part of that's the pressure of we got to release a great title. This is my first title in 20 years. This thing needs to hit.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if we hear about those dynamics. I don't. Again, my feeling is the same as what I've said before.
By the way, just so people, I don't want people think that I know anything inside. I'm just speculating.
Yeah. I just don't know that anybody's under pressure at Microsoft. I don't see evidence of that. I don't see evidence of the pressure cooker.
Are you saying that they're just hanging out the lobby having coffee and?
I'm saying, and admittedly, this is me from the outside looking in. Yeah, this is me from the outside looking in.
Now, is that you like putting on your software developer hat, the line of work you've done, and just kind of saying, wait a minute, based on the production pipeline issues they've had, is that why is that? I just want people to understand kind of your perspective where it's coming from.
Yeah, I don't. There's a if again, and this is me stepping out on the edge from overly trusting my instinct. I just don't see evidence of people getting their ass chewed. Number one, there's a certain voice track and soundtrack that comes with that, right? You talk about. I mean, you look at NFL head coaches, right, in post game interviews. And again, I deeply respect
Tom
Spencer. Brady. Right? Tons of what he says resonates with me. And I'm all for putting on a brave face, right? But when I have to go in front of a camera or a large group of people and take a mea culpa, I'm not smiling when I do it, right? And I don't know. I just get this pervasive feel like I don't like. And again, I know that it's the responsibility of leadership to to be positive and to feel like they're defending their people and yada yada yada. I don't like. It just, I don't know. Formula One, right? Formula One has this whole dynamic to it. Try and draw an analogy here that maybe not everybody sticks with. Formula One has a whole dynamic to it where when the drivers get interviewed, there's a lot of dynamics around what they say, right? Anybody who's played the F1 game from Codemasters knows this because they actually model in the game. But say if a Formula One driver gets interviewed post game and says something like, the car just felt like it didn't have grip, right? Then his crew is kind of like, what? What the fuck did he say? Right? So, and sometimes, right, you'll get pushed to say that. Sometimes I, as a leader, get pushed to say a certain thing in public if I need to apply pressure to a team, right? Particularly when many leadership efforts that I've made haven't, right, really wound up, given the results that I've wanted. Sometimes I get kind of pushed into a corner by a team where I feel like they're just not getting it, right? And I just don't feel like I've heard a voice track that takes the accountability and identifies the things that are going specifically wrong in the Microsoft production pipeline that gives me the confidence that they've identified what those things are wrong and are working on them, right? I haven't heard about, our productivity is down, our velocity is down. I've gotten the one soundbite from Spencer where he says, we can talk about COVID and going remote and all the things, and that's an excuse, right? So I thank him for finally, saying that so that the Xbox community can get off my case when I say the same thing. But that's what I haven't heard. One of the key things I haven't heard the postmortem, right, of the last 4 years that says, hey, Game Pass came out in 2017. We acquired studios in 2018. Over the last 4 years, these are the things that we've done wrong, right? And here's what we're doing to fix them. I have not heard that. I've just heard, hey, next year things are going to be better. And that's great to be results oriented.
Or it's like for marketing, you hear we hear you loud and clear.
Right.
Well, do you? I mean, like,
right.
Who are you listening to? You're not listening to me.
Yeah, to me, again, I talk about OQE, objective quality evidence, right? Objective evidence that we've done internal analysis and that we've done a postmortem and that we know what we're doing wrong and we know that we're going to change is starting to convey that, right, to consumers, right? When I have a program that's gone bad, what I do is I go to the customer and I say, here's what we effed up, right? This, and this, and here's what we're doing to fix it. And I haven't heard that voice track, which just doesn't inspire me to confidence that's.
But Hamp, is that voice track though for Microsoft? In this case, is it acquisitions?
No, because
it's. I understand from a release standpoint, but again, I mean them acquiring like Activision, Bethesda. I mean it plays on the hopes of the Xbox faithful of, hey, you know what? They're addressing things that we've voiced concerns about, that they don't have enough first party games or first party studios.
But I think, and again, let me admit when I say this, right? People need to understand when I talk about these aspects of business, they need to understand that my own personal approach is to be incredibly open and incredibly transparent, right? To the point of, on more than one occasion getting my ass chewed by my boss about being overly open and transparent. I'm just of the feeling that when you give people the straight stick, right, then they don't have suspicions, right? If people are lobbying suspicions at you,
I don't disagree with you about being transparent, by the way, and I think it leads to can lead to additional business in the future. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
So my feeling is if acquisitions were the recovery, right? If they were the return to green, then the voice track I would have along with it is, look, we've over the years we've acquired 23, 24 studios, right? Due to this, and this, we have failed to achieve the production velocity, right, on a reliable, deterministic cadence that people expect when they show us loyalty by subscribing to Game Pass. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to shore up that production pipeline. We need to get it moving, right? But on top of that, we also need to have redundancy, because a fact of the business is that people are going to miss. People are going to run into problems. We're going to have people who leave teams. We're going to have schedules that are negatively impacted. We're going to have things that go over budget. We understand that, and we plan for it. And so based on our estimation, in order to get to a point where we have one AAA first-party title dropping in Game Pass every quarter, and for those releases to be of quality, we need to have, right, 1.5 times the number of studios that you would normally need to maintain that cadence, so that we have redundancy. Therefore, we're going after and acquiring these additional studios. That would be my voice track, but that's not what I've heard.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I mean, Ryan Lennis says being transparent can also lead to new solutions. I don't disagree with that, Ryan. I think that's a fair point. Yeah. So Hap, look, it is almost 8:00, man, and I need to get some dinner. But look, I think this was a great conversation. Number one, this is a great rant, Hap. Great rant. Hopefully, we get to do some more rants next week, as I'm off. I don't know what your schedule's like, but we should definitely do some more rants, because I'm sure something's going to come up. But look, yeah, go ahead, man.
I want to double up on the apology that I made earlier. Look, a lot of great questions. Falky's been going off like Falky. I apologize. I had to pull my thoughts together through that last section. I just had to kind of turn away from the chat. So I apologize. You made some great points, and I am deeply sorry that we weren't able to address all of them and bring them into the conversation. Yeah,
I was going to say that. They're actually really great questions in the chat. Which is, look, I'm all for the questions, reasonable questions, but because I think it's healthy to have that discourse, to ask questions, and so yeah, we'll I don't know, maybe we should do like a questions podcast or something, where it's just we just answer.
I've been thinking that a kind of an ask me anything session would be great. And when I say ask me anything, let's not fall off the cliff. Let's not fall off the ledge. That's an ask me anything with regards to games or the industry or software development or anything of that nature. We're not going to be crawling through BRAP's personal life history here on air.
Yeah, no, it's going to be game related. So, but no, I mean, like, I think that's. Gregor Vandu says, I missed the show yesterday. Did BRAP give away Carson Wentz jersey? No, and if I did, would want it anyway. So, but no, I think that's a good idea. I think maybe next week, Camp, if you're around, if you're available, maybe we should do like a Q&A for folks in the live chat. Again, all gaming related. And so yeah, we can answer some questions. So, but anyhow, look, thank you everyone in the live chat. I really appreciate it. Again, look, I agree with what Ham said earlier. I think the live chat has gotten much better over the last couple of weeks. And this is what we wanted to do. We wanted to foster an environment here where people can have really good conversations, where it's not like, oh, Xbox sucks, you're a pony shit eater, and Jim Ryan's evil. That's cap. Like, that's not what we're trying to do here. There's plenty of other podcasts that do that. You're more than welcome to go and, hang out in those live chats. But we're trying to have good conversation here, thoughtful conversation, and we're starting to see that in the live chat. So I just want to say thank you to everyone in the live chat. I really appreciate it. But Hamp, look, man, always a pleasure. Thank you again, man, for your time. I know this was kind of last minute, but yeah, always a pleasure, man. Always a pleasure. So, Hamp, if you want to be found, let everyone know they can find you.
Yeah, I'd probably say the biggest thing I'd say is over my show, the Enough to Keep Going Weekly Games podcast over on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. That's the 2 is a number 2. We just finished up our 2 end of the year shows that we normally do in January, but we wanted to kind of push to get them done in December so that we could kind of just focus on new games in January. So we did the annual news wrap up where we cover what, in our estimation, were the 40 biggest news stories of 2022 in the games industry. So please feel free to check that show out. The other thing that we did is, my favorite show of the year, which is our Gaming Superlative Awards. And so we went through, I guess what must have been 56 games and picks from the 4 co-hosts. And we covered, we have 14 categories, everything from biggest surprise game of the year to best storycraft, most likely for a family game night, most likely to be game of the year in most other media outlets, hidden gem, most overlooked game, most likely to regret trading or not playing in 2022, most likely to still be playing in 2023. Denver Publisher with the best attitude in the face of adversity. One of my favorites, the Wretched Hive of Scum and Villainy, game most emblematic of sleazy business award. Through all those categories and more, a total of 14, all 4 co-hosts go, we make our picks. We go into a blind nil, so nobody knows what the other co-host picks are, except the person hosting that show. And we go around the table, round robin, and go through each category and reveal what the picks are and have a little bit of dialogue about the reasons why. So that episode is also posted. So please feel free to check that out. A little something different from the norm. We try and skew away from the game of the year kind of podcast that so many other podcasts do, and do something a little different that people will find interesting.
Yeah, no, and actually, I did drop the link. Edward Jordan says every time I can never find Hamp's podcast, so I just dropped a link in the live chat to the E2KG network. So if anyone wants to check that out, the link's there in the live chat. So,
hey, can I just one thing before we get off the air?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
So Victor Allenstein, Lee Hampton, you can only come out and speak of what you have publicly accepted. Xbox has never said they had a management problem. That has been some fan accusations. So first of all, Victor, when I make an accusation, it's not an accusation as a fan. It's an accusation from an analysis perspective. Here's the reason why I identify it as a problem. And I haven't specifically said management problem. I've said production problem. Which hinges on technology, hinges on process, hinges on corporate governance, and then hinges on management and leadership. So it's about a 5-vector problem. The reason it's typified as a problem is because by Microsoft's own admission, right? And I never leveraged this against them until this was pointed out to me, right? And I found it. So again, it's not a supposition. It's based on a fact. By Microsoft's own admission in a conference that they held in, what was it? Was that 2020, BRAP?
What's that?
The Microsoft strategy meeting that they held that you pointed me to? I think it was 2020.
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, their description of their own strategy was that their intent was to have one AAA first-party game placed in Game Pass every quarter. That is Microsoft strategy. That's not Hamp strategy. That's not BRAP strategy. That is Microsoft strategy. Now, quantifiably, objectively, they have failed to meet their own goal that they set for themselves. So when I say they have a productivity problem, they have a velocity problem, they have a delivery problem, it is their own rubric that I'm using to define that. Now, if they come out and they say that's not our strategy anymore, then I'll back off of that. But right now, that is a problem. They have their own internal performance metric, what we often refer to as a key performance indicator, a KPI, that they are not hitting. So that's why it's a problem. Sorry, I felt that was a good essential thing to kind of cover.
No, Hamp. I mean that's a great point. It's something that people look. Some people just don't have that perspective, Hamp. I think it's fair for you to share that perspective, given what you do. That's well said. Let's see here. What company has ever come out and publicly stated? Yeah, I mean, Falky's right. I mean, what companies don't typically come out and say there's management issues. They typically don't. They typically don't do that. But I think to your point, Hamp, they're not meeting certain things or KPIs. I was going to say as an organization, but more particularly the Xbox side of things. So.
Yeah, and Victor's now saying, Spencer's talked about the no games problem. They are making moves to address it. Victor, I've spent 15 or 20 minutes talking about the fact that they're making moves to address it. But what I've said is my calculations show that they're not going to achieve resolution of that problem in 2023, right? That it's going to be later than that. And then I point to, if you're an Xbox fan who has had an expectation of productivity, then that's 4 years, right, between the first acquisitions in 2018 and now, and then another year and a half to 2 years potentially that potential is not going to be met, right? Look, at the end of the day, they've got 23 studios. They're not producing output that's commensurate with those 23 studios. Simple, period. It's mathematical. So, Victor, believe me, I'm thoroughly familiar with how software development companies work. I'm thoroughly familiar with what their production output should be right now. And what I'm saying is that they're below that mathematical target.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Hap. All right, everyone. Thank you again so much for hanging out with us. Really appreciate it. Everyone, please have a safe and happy holidays. If you're the Midwest, East Coast, be safe. There's some really bad weather that's hitting that portion of the United States. Everyone, please be careful if you're out there. And again, have a safe, happy holidays. And BRAP will be back at some point. Another BRAP rant sometime next week. Give me a follow on the Twitters at BRAP_podcast so that you are up to speed with shows, times when we go live, and all that other good stuff. So, but also do me a quick favor. Please also don't forget that the DPS podcast, that's Slow-Mo and Gaming Forte's podcast, that goes live tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So please go over there. I think it's on, I said it earlier, now I forgot. I think it's on Slow-Mo's channel, right? Is it Slow-Mo's channel today?
Yeah, that's what yep.
All right, it's on Slow-Mo's channel. So, definitely check out Slow-Mo and Gaming Forte tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time. I'm actually going to drop a link. There's the link to Slow-Mo's channel. So go sub, go check them out. They always have a great show. They do a great job talking about video games too. They really do. So please check them out tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time. On that note, we are out. Thank you again, everyone, for your time. Appreciate it. Do me a favor, hit that like button. And if you're new to the show, consider subscribing and hit the bell notification so that you're alerted when we go live. On that note, we're out. Everyone, enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.